Tonight, we uncover the chilling possibility that our universe's birth was not a beginning, but a violent erasure of something that refused to die. Imagine staring into the deepest, darkest reaches of the void, expecting to witness the very first breath of creation. We were told that if we looked back far enough, we would find a nursery, a place of primitive gas in the faint flickering light of the first stars struggling to ignite in the wake of the Big Bang. But when the James Webb Space Telescope finally peeled back the curtain of time, it didn't find a nursery. It found a graveyard of giants. These aren't just distant lights, they are cosmic ghosts that defy every law of physics we hold dear. They are structures so vast, so mature, and so ancient that they should not exist. Their presence suggests a terrifying reality that the Big Bang was not the starting gun of a new race, but a veil thrown over a previous existence, one that left behind fossils to haunt our understanding of reality. On September 1st, a team of 16 scientists published a paper that sent a collective shiver through the foundations of modern astronomy. They had been using the James Webb Space Telescope to peer into the Dark Ages, a period of cosmic history where, according to every textbook on your shelf, the universe was supposed to be a cold, formless soup of hydrogen. This was the era before the first stars had even begun to coalesce. We expected to see the smoke and ashes of a rapid firework, as the father of the Big Bang theory, Georges Lemaitre, once described it. But what these scientists saw on their screens wasn't the scattered remnants of a beginning, it was the impossible. They found galaxies that were not just present, but fully developed, massive, and structured, looking as mature as our own Milky Way galaxy. This discovery has shattered the common understanding of cosmic expansion. For decades, the narrative was simple. A singularity exploded. Inflation smoothed everything out like a cosmic delete key, and then matter slowly clumped together over billions of years. But these universe breakers represent a massive lore gap in our story, an anachronism that challenges the very timeline of the Big Bang. If these galaxies are as mature as ours despite being billions of years closer to the beginning, it implies they didn't just form quickly, they might be remnants that survived a previous cosmic cycle. They are impossible fossils from an aeon that refused to be erased. Think about the sheer dread of that implication. We have always viewed the Big Bang as an absolute north pole of time, a point where you simply cannot go any further north. We believed that at the moment of the bang, the universe was so hot and so dense that all information from before was liquidated. It was supposed to be a perfect reset, a hot, dense phase where the slate was wiped clean. But the existence of these mature galaxies suggests that the signal from before time is still leaking through the cracks of our reality. Standard cosmology tells us that for the first 380,000 years, the universe was a soup so thick that light itself couldn't even move. It was a nuclear reactor of protons and neutrons. Only after it cooled did the first red glow of the cosmic microwave background escape. But how can you have a fully formed spiral galaxy existing in a time when the universe hadn't even finished cooling its milk? It's like pouring milk into a cup of black coffee and finding that the mixture is already perfectly baked the second the milk hits the surface. There wasn't enough time for the mixing to occur. This homogeneity puzzle is the great mystery that researchers are still trying to solve. Some physicists, like Sir Roger Penrose, have spent decades warning us that the Big Bang was not the beginning. He argues for a framework called conformal cyclic cosmology, suggesting that our universe's future is actually another universe's beginning. In this view, we are just one aeon in an infinite chain of universes, If he is right, the galaxies the James Webb Telescope is seeing aren't new structures that formed impossibly fast. Instead, they could be the ghostly imprints of supermassive black hole collisions and structures from a previous universe that were somehow carried over through the transition. This turns the Big Bang from an act of creation into a mask of ignorance. We use the word singularity to describe the beginning, but a singularity is really just a place where our math breaks down, where density and temperature become infinite and the laws of physics simply give up. We've been using this singularity as a placeholder for what we don't know, a curtain we were never supposed to look behind. But these impossible fossils are forcing us to look. They suggest that the beginning was merely a phase change, a transition from a state we cannot comprehend into the physical world we see today. If the universe did not start from a single point of nothingness, then the question of what existed before becomes the most terrifying inquiry in science. Was it a void with memory, where information cannot be destroyed and the patterns of a previous, terrifying reality are hard-coded into the very vacuum energy of our current space? We are finding that the Dark Ages were not dark at all. They were populated by structures that shouldn't have the right to exist in our timeline. Every time we point our telescopes deeper into the void, we are finding more evidence that the universe is much older and much more complex than the 13.8 billion-year-old story we've been told. These mature galaxies are the first tangible clues that we are living in the refracted echoes of a previous reality. We are like detectives who have walked into a room that was supposed to be freshly painted, only to find ancient, weathered furniture already sitting in the center. The terrifying truth is that we might be wrong about the Big Bang entirely. It wasn't a bang in the sense of an explosion throwing matter out into an empty room. It was the expansion of space itself, and if space can expand, it can contract. This leads us to the Big Bounce, the idea that our universe is a rebound of a previously collapsing one. If we are living in a bounce, then we are the shrapnel of a higher dimensional impact, survivors of a cosmic collision that erased almost everything, but not these impossible fossils. As we peel back the layers of this mystery, we realize that the James Webb Telescope hasn't just found old galaxies. It has found a crack in the mirror of time. It has shown us that the beginning was a lie we told ourselves to feel safe in a universe with a clear origin. But the something terrifying that existed before is not a ghost story. It is a mathematical necessity that is now showing its face in our deepest images of the cosmos. And as we look closer at the math of that singularity, we will find that the mask is slipping, revealing a reality that is far more ancient and far more intentional than we ever dared to imagine. To understand why we were wrong about the Big Bang, we must first confront the most famous word in all of science, a word that has been used to silence our curiosity for nearly a century, the singularity. In the standard textbook story of our universe, the singularity is the point where it all began, a tiny, infinitely dense, and infinitely hot pinprick that contained everything we see today. We are taught to visualize it as the ultimate origin, the North Pole of time, beyond which it is impossible to travel. But there is a dirty secret hidden in the heart of modern physics. The singularity is not a physical place or an actual event. It is a lie. When physicists use the word singularity, they aren't describing a discovery, they are describing a failure. They are admitting that their math has broken down. If you take Albert Einstein's equations of general relativity and run the cosmic film in reverse, you see the universe contracting. Galaxies move closer together, space-time curves more sharply, and the density of matter begins to skyrocket. But as you reach the 13.8 billion year mark, the numbers do something terrifying. They go to infinity. The temperature becomes infinite. The density becomes infinite. In the world of mathematics and computer simulations, infinity is a white flag. It is a signal that your theory has been pushed to its absolute limit and can no longer cope with. Reality. Computers, the very tools we use to simulate the birth of stars, absolutely loathe singularities because they represent a division by zero in the fabric of the cosmos. At these extreme densities, Einstein's theory of gravity, which governs the very large, enters into a violent, irreconcilable conflict with quantum mechanics, which governs the very small. These two pillars of science, which work perfectly in our daily lives, essentially divorce at the moment of the Big Bang. Because we lack a unified theory of quantum gravity, we use the word singularity as a polite way of saying, "Here be dragons." It is a placeholder for our collective ignorance. This placeholder has served a very specific psychological purpose. It gave us a beginning. Humans are hardwired to crave origin stories, and the singularity provided a convenient starting gun, a day without a yesterday. But even Einstein himself found the idea that the universe started at a singular point repugnant. He sensed that the singularity was a mask, a curtain drawn across the stage of history to hide a much older and potentially incomprehensible reality. By calling it the beginning of time and space, we effectively stopped asking what happened before, because the singularity made the question mathematically illegal. But if the singularity is a failure of our equations and not a physical boundary, then the wall at the beginning of the universe is actually a fog. When we remove the mask of the singularity, we find that time doesn't necessarily stop at the 13.8 billion year mark. Some models, like the Big Bounce, suggest that as the universe contracts toward that singular state, a new kind of physics, perhaps a discrete structure of space-time, itself reaches a maximum density and then pushes back. Instead of collapsing into an impossible point of infinity, the universe rebounds. It bounces. This implies that the Big Bang was not the birth of the universe, but a violent transition phase, like water turning into steam. This realization is where the true terror begins. If the singularity is a lie, then our universe is not 13.8 billion years old. It could be infinitely old. We are not the first occupants of this space. We are merely the current inhabitants of a reality that has been recycled, perhaps countless times, through successive aeons. The Big Bang was simply the moment the old world was compressed until its laws of physics melted and were recast into the ones we know today. The singularity served to protect us from this existential dread. It allowed us to believe that there was a clean break, a moment where the slate was wiped completely clean and all information from the before was liquidated. We wanted to believe in a universe with a clear, sterile origin. But as the James Webb Space Telescope peers deeper into the void and finds galaxies that are too mature for our timeline, the mask is beginning to slip. These impossible fossils are proof that something survived the transition. They are the physical evidence that the singularity was never a wall, but a veil. We have been living in a house where we were told the foundations were laid only yesterday, yet we are finding ancient weathered furniture in the basement that we cannot explain. The singularity was the story we told ourselves to keep from looking into that basement. We are now forced to reckon with the fact that our beginning was merely a local event, a system reset in a much larger, darker, and more ancient cosmic cycle. Nature generally does not work in infinities. It prefers to smooth things out. If we replace Einstein's theory with a more complete understanding of gravity, the singularity vanishes, and in its place, we find a bridge to the past. This means that the terrifying thing that existed before the Big Bang was never truly gone. It was compressed, heated, and reshuffled, but its echoes are still vibrating through the vacuum of space. The singularity was a mask for our ignorance, but the James Webb Telescope has just started to lift the edge of that curtain, revealing that the beginning was the greatest myth ever told. If the singularity is a mathematical mask, then we must confront the physical event that constructed the wall between us and our past, a period of time so violent and so efficient that it effectively acted as a cosmic delete key for reality itself. This is the secret phase of our history that mainstream science calls cosmic inflation. For decades, we were taught that the Big Bang was an explosion that threw matter outward into a void, but the truth is far more unsettling. Before the heat, before the light, and before the particles of matter that make up your body ever existed, there was a phase where the universe was cold, empty, and accelerating, exponentially fast. In a fraction of a second so small the human mind cannot even process it, less than a millionths of a second, the universe doubled and doubled in size. It began smaller than a single atom and, in the blink of a cosmic eye, became larger than the entire observable universe we see today. This was not a gentle expansion, it was a breathtaking, runaway growth, fueled by a mysterious form of energy that permeated the very fabric of empty space. Think of the sheer scale of that violence. To go from the subatomic to the galactic in a trillionth of a second requires a force that defies our understanding of kinetic energy. But it is what this expansion did to the before that should keep you awake at night. Physicists describe inflation as a smoothing mechanism. If the universe before this moment was messy, chaotic, or filled with the jagged structures of a previous aeon, inflation acted like a cosmic steamroller. It took all the lumps and bumps of whatever existed before and stretched them out so thinly that they became virtually invisible to us today. This is the homogeneity puzzle that continues to haunt researchers. When we look out into the deep sky, the universe appears eerily similar in every single direction. Whether you look left or right, the temperature and density of the cosmos are almost perfectly uniform. Standard Big Bang theory cannot explain this, because different parts of the sky are too far apart to have ever communicated or reached a thermal equilibrium. It would be like pouring milk into a cup of black coffee and finding that the mixture is already a perfect, uniform beige before you even have time to stir it. Inflation is the only explanation we have for this impossible perfection. It tells us that the universe was once a tiny, interconnected patch that was suddenly violently ripped apart and stretched until it was flat and smooth. But in doing so, inflation washed out almost all information about the universe's initial state. It essentially deleted the blueprints of whatever came before. Every galaxy we see, every star we chart, and every planet we discover is built from the ripples left behind when inflation finally stopped and dumped its energy into space, the event we perceive as the hot Big Bang. But what was buried under those ripples? This is the massive lore gap that we have been conditioned to ignore. We are told that inflation solved the problems of the Big Bang, but we rarely ask why the universe needed to be smoothed so perfectly in the first place. If information theory holds that information cannot be truly destroyed, then inflation wasn't just an expansion, it was an attempt at total erasure. This leads us to a terrifying question that few scientists dare to voice. What was so dangerous about the before that the universe had to expand fast enough to erase it? Why did the inflaton field, the force driving this madness, suddenly switch on and accelerate the fabric of reality at such an impossible rate? In some models, like eternal inflation, this process never truly ends. It is an infinite fractal of big bangs where inflation only stops in tiny isolated patches like our own. This suggests that our entire reality is just a small, safe bubble where the delete key was momentarily paused. Outside our bubble, the erasure continues forever, a relentless storm of expansion that prevents any two universes from ever touching or sharing their secrets. If we view the Big Bang as a system reset, then inflation was the initialization protocol that wiped the hard drive of the previous reality. It was a computational necessity to clear the mess of a previous version of existence that had become unstable or terrifying in its complexity. We look at the smooth, uniform sky and see beauty, but we should perhaps see a crime scene where the evidence has been meticulously scrubbed away. The signal from before time is the only thing that might have survived this process, leaking through in those rare impossible fossils like the mature galaxies found by the James Webb Telescope. These structures are like fragments of data that the cosmic delete key failed to fully overwrite, glitches in a universe that was supposed to be a fresh start. The standard paradigm tells us that inflation is the hero of our origin story because it explains why our universe is so perfectly balanced for life. It tells us that without this rapid expansion, the universe would have either collapsed back in on itself or become a chaotic, clumpy mess where stars and galaxies could never form. But this balance comes at a staggering price. By smoothing the universe, inflation has rendered the before inaccessible, a forbidden zone of history that is mathematically hidden behind a wall of exponential growth. We are like people who have woken up in a perfectly clean, sterile room with no memory of how we got there, only to realize that the walls are still moving outward at the speed of light to ensure we never see what's on the other side. The something terrifying before the Big Bang wasn't just a different state of matter, it was a reality so incompatible with our own that the universe had to physically tear itself apart to escape it. As we look closer at the inflaton field, we find that it behaves like a ball rolling down a hill in a landscape that doesn't exist in our three-dimensional space. When that ball reached the bottom, inflation turned off, and our world began. But the ancient field at the top of that hill still exists in the math, a deeper substrate of reality that predates space and time themselves. We are the shrapnel of that field's collapse, living in the smoke and ashes of an event that was designed to be a final, absolute beginning. But the ghosts are starting to appear in our telescopes, and the wall of inflation is showing its first cracks. We are beginning to realize that the delete key didn't work. Something survived, and it is much older than the light. To find what survived the cosmic delete key of inflation, we must look into the one place we were told was empty, the void. We think of the vacuum of space as a blank canvas, a state of absolute nothingness that exists between the stars. We've been conditioned to believe that before the Big Bang, there was a literal nothing, no space, no time, no energy, and certainly no memory. But modern physics has a much more disturbing revelation for us. If you were to perform the ultimate experiment and remove every atom, every photon of light, every particle of dark matter, and every wisp of radiation from the universe, you would not find nothing. You would find a vacuum that is teeming with a hidden, restless life. This is the void with memory, and it suggests that we aren't living in a brand new universe, but in the refracted echoes of the last one. When William Shatner went to space at the age of 90, he expected to find a grand mystery, but instead, he described an overwhelming, all-encompassing, cold, dark black void. That looked like death itself. But what he couldn't see was that he was staring at the most active substance in existence. According to quantum field theory, one of the most successful theories in human history, the universe is not made of stuff floating in empty space. Instead, the universe is a collection of energy fields that permeate every single inch of reality. These fields are like a sea of chaotic activity. They are like a room filled with varying levels of heat or a pool of water. Even when the water is perfectly still, it is still there. This brings us to the 0-point energy. If you take a quantum field and cool it down to its lowest possible energy state, you reach a point where no more energy can be extracted. You would assume this value is 0. But the universe doesn't understand our concept of 0. In that empty space, there remains an inherent, finite, and positive value of energy that can never be removed. This 0-point energy is the closest approximation to nothing we have, yet it is a state where particles and antiparticles, virtual particles, are constantly popping in and out of existence, borrowing energy from the vacuum only to disappear a fraction of a second later. The horrifying implication is that the nothingness before the Big Bang was never truly empty. If the universe is a collection of fields, and those fields endure even when matter is gone, then the emptiness that preceded our birth was already programmed with the laws of physics. It was a void with memory, a pre-physical state where information patterns existed before there was ever a single star to hold them. In this framework, the Big Bang was not an act of creation, but a transition from a pure informational state to a physical one. This shifts our entire understanding of reality. It suggests that the universe is less about things and more about patterns. Think of a piece of music. The information of the symphony exists as a pattern of notes on a page, even if the orchestra isn't playing. The Big Bang was simply the moment the orchestra began to play, but the score was already written in the vacuum energy. This is the information theory angle that most documentaries ignore, the idea that information cannot be truly destroyed. If information survived the transition from the previous universe, then it is hard-coded into the very vacuum energy we move through every day. We are finding that the homogeneity of our universe, the fact that everything is so eerily similar, might not just be a result of inflation smoothing things out. It might be because the blueprints for our universe were already present in the void with memory. We are living in a reality that is an expression or projection of deeper, intangible informational structures that predated space and time. Space-time itself may have emerged from this ancient field, a substrate that is not confined by the laws of our three-dimensional world. This leads us to a conclusion that is as beautiful as it is terrifying. We are living in the refracted echoes of the last universe. Just as a lens refracts light and changes its direction but preserves the source, the Big Bang was a cosmic lens that reshuffled the information of a previous existence into a new form. We see the smoke and ashes of a fireworks display, but we are beginning to realize that the fireworks were designed by someone or something using a set of instructions that the fire could not consume. The 0-point energy we measure today is like the faint hiss of a recording that was supposed to be erased. It is the background noise of a previous aeon. If the system reset of the Big Bang was a computational initialization, then the vacuum energy is the cache that wasn't cleared. It contains the artifacts of the old world, the glitches in our physical constants that we can't explain. Why is gravity exactly this strong? Why is the speed of light exactly this fast? In a truly new universe, these would be random, but in a void with memory, these constants are the residual settings from the universe that came before. We have been taught to look at the stars to find our origins, but the real secret is hidden in the gaps between them. The nothingness is not a void, it is a graveyard of information, a storage device of infinite capacity that has held the patterns of every universe that has ever existed. As we look closer at these quantum fluctuations, we realize that we aren't just matter floating in a void. We are the ripples in a field that has been vibrating for an eternity. The something terrifying before the Big Bang didn't go away. It simply changed its frequency. It is still here, whispering through the vacuum, a silent witness to the fact that there was never a beginning, only a long, haunted memory of what we used to be. To truly grasp the something terrifying that preceded our world, we must move beyond the equations of the living and listen to the testimony of the dead. If the Big Bang was a mask and inflation was a delete key that failed to scrub the hard drive of reality, then there must be a way to see the ghosts of what came before. This brings us to one of the most brilliant and unsettling frameworks in modern physics, conformal cyclic cosmology, or CCC. Proposed by Sir Roger Penrose, a man whose work on black holes earned him the Nobel Prize, CCC suggests that our 13.8 billion year history is not the whole story. We are merely one aeon in an infinite, eternal chain of universes. To understand how we got here, we have to look at how the universe before ours ended. Imagine the remote, distant future of our own universe. Trillions upon trillions of years from now, the stars have all burnt out. The galaxies have drifted so far apart that they are no longer visible to one another. The very last remnants of matter have been swallowed by supermassive black holes. But even these monsters do not last forever. Through a process called Hawking evaporation, these black holes will slowly, over unimaginable spans of time, bleed their energy back into the void until they, too, vanish into nothingness. What is left? A universe populated by nothing but photons, particles of light. This is where Penrose's theory takes a turn into the surreal. As we've discussed, photons are unique. They travel along null geodesics, meaning they do not experience time or space. Because they have no mass, they have no clocks. For a photon, there is no difference between a millimeter and a light year, or a second and a billion years. In a universe filled only with massless particles, the very concepts of big and small lose their meaning. This is what physicists call conformal invariance, a mathematical state where you can stretch or squash the fabric of the universe and the particles inside wouldn't even notice. The difference. Penrose argues that when a universe becomes this empty and this diffuse, its infinity becomes physically indistinguishable from a singularity. Through a mathematical trick of geometry, the incredibly cold, thin, and vast end of one universe can be rescaled into the incredibly hot, dense, and tiny beginning of the next. The remote future of the previous aeon literally becomes the Big Bang of our own. It is a system reset that doesn't require a beginning or an end, only a transition. But if this transition is so smooth, how do we know it happened? This is where the narrative shifts from abstract math to cosmic horror. If our universe was born from the corpse of a previous one, it should bear the scars of its predecessor's most violent moments. Penrose suggests that these ghostly imprints are hidden in plain sight, etched into the cosmic microwave background, the baby scan of our universe's first moments. When we look at the CMB, we see a mostly uniform glow, but buried within that data are strange, anomalous patterns, concentric circles of temperature variance. Penrose and his colleagues argue that these rings are not random fluctuations. Instead, they are the scars of supermassive black hole collisions that occurred in the universe before ours. Think about the sheer scale of that violence. Imagine two black holes, each millions of times more massive than our sun, spiraling toward each other in the dying days of the previous aeon. Their collision would have sent out gravitational waves so powerful they shook the very foundations of space-time. While inflation was supposed to be the cosmic delete key that smoothed these ripples out, CCC suggests that the sheer magnitude of these events allowed them to leak through the transition. These waves didn't just disappear, they left a permanent bruise on the fabric of the vacuum that carried over into our Big Bang. We are looking at impossible fossils, but not made of matter, they are made of gravity. These concentric circles are the signal from before time, the echoes of a previous reality that was intentionally wiped but refused to stay silent. They are the ghosts of giants that died before time, as we know it, even began. This turns the CMB from a picture of a nursery into a map of a graveyard. This realization creates a profound sense of existential dread. If these circles are real, it means our universe is built on the ruins of a previous civilization's cosmic history. It implies that every aeon is haunted by the remnants of the one that came before. We have been taught to see the Big Bang as a moment of pure, sterile creation, but Penrose's framework suggests it was a refracted echo. We are living in a house that was built using the scorched timber of a mansion that burned down an eternity ago. The something terrifying before the Big Bang is the realization that the universe has no memory of us, but it has a very long memory of its own violence. If supermassive black holes from the last universe could leave scars on ours, then what are we doing right now that will haunt the next aeon? As our own black holes merge and grow, they are preparing the bruises for the next Big Bang. This echoes of forgotten aeons angle forces us to reconsider the now. If the past, present, and future are all interlocked in a continuous cyclic chain, then the beginning was never a wall, it was a bridge. We are finding that the dark ages of our early universe were actually illuminated by the smoke and ashes of a previous world's end. The concentric circles in the sky are a warning. Nothing is ever truly deleted. Information survives. The void with memory ensures that the patterns of the old world are hard-coded into the very geometry of our space. When you look up at the night sky, you aren't just looking at stars, you are looking through a veil at the shrapnel of an infinite number of previous existences. The singularity was the story we told ourselves to feel like the first inhabitants of reality. But the CMB scars tell a different story, a story of a universe that refuses to die, that recycles its trauma, and that leaves us to wonder what else from that previous terrifying existence is still lurking in the parts of the code we haven't yet decrypted. We are the survivors of a cosmic reset that was never quite complete, and the ghosts are finally starting to speak. If the concentric circles of Penrose's cycles represent a ghost story written in the stars, then the theory of multiverse collisions is a narrative of cosmic violence on a scale that defies the very definition of space. We have spent decades looking at the Big Bang as an internal event, a singular explosion that happened here to create everything. But a growing number of physicists are beginning to suspect that we have been looking at the wrong side of the glass. What if the bang didn't come from within our reality? but was a catastrophic impact from without. To understand this, we have to discard the idea of our universe as a solitary expanding ball and instead visualize the totality of existence as a vast frothing cosmic foam. In this higher dimensional perspective, our entire observable universe, all 94 billion light years of it, is nothing more than a single fragile bubble drifting in a sea of infinite others. This is the landscape of eternal inflation, a process that some theorists believe never truly stops. In this infinite fractal universe, inflation is the default state of the cosmos, a relentless storm of expansion that constantly spawns new patches or bubbles. While inflation may have ended in our local pocket 13, 8 billion years ago, creating the hot dense phase we call the Big Bang, it continues unabated just beyond our horizon. We are living in a tiny, temporary clearing within a perpetual blizzard of creation. But these bubbles are not always isolated. This is where the theory of brains, short for membranes, introduces a terrifying physicality to the origin of our world. Imagine that our three-dimensional universe is actually just a sheet of reality, much like a single page in a massive book. This sheet is floating in a higher dimensional space that physicists call the bulk. In this higher dimensional sea, there isn't just our sheet, there are others parallel to our own, drifting through a space we cannot perceive. The something terrifying before the Big Bang was not a point of infinite density, but the looming shadow of another reality. For eons, these two sheets, two massive brains of existence, drifted toward one another through the higher dimensional bulk. The Big Bang was not a birth from nothing, it was the Great Collision. When these two sheets of reality slammed into each other, the energy of that impact was so incomprehensible that it instantly heated the brains to billions of degrees. To the entities, if there were any, living on the surface of those sheets, the moment of impact would have looked like a sudden, violent eruption of heat and light from every point, in space simultaneously. This is why we were wrong about the explosion of the Big Bang. It wasn't matter being thrown out into an empty room, it was the crash of two worlds heating the very fabric of our space. Under this framework, we are literally the shrapnel of a higher dimensional impact. Every atom in your body, the gold in your jewelry, and the hydrogen in the sun are the thermal debris left over from a collision between two universes. We aren't the main event, we are the radioactive fallout of a cosmic accident. This brain-world model suggests that the Big Bang is a recurring event, a cyclic collision that happens every time these sheets drift back together. It solves the flatness problem and the horizon problem without needing the cosmic delete key of inflation, because the smoothing happens during the long period of contraction and drift before the impact. But it replaces the sterile singularity with a much more disturbing image. Our reality is at the mercy of movements in dimensions we cannot see. If our universe is just one bubble in a cosmic foam, drifting and bobbing alongside an infinite number of others, then the most terrifying prospect is that we aren't alone in the bulk. And collisions might not be limited to the beginning of time. If two bubble universes were to intersect or brush against each other today, the interaction would reshape the laws of physics themselves. It would leave detectable scars, massive, anomalous bruises in the cosmic microwave background that would signify a multiverse collision. We have always searched for our origin as if it were a clean, singular point. But the Great Collision theory suggests we are looking at a crime scene on a multiversal scale. We are the remnants of a crash, building our civilizations on the cooling debris of an impact that occurred in a higher dimension. This implies that our universe is not an isolated system, but is fundamentally open to the bulk. The something terrifying before the Big Bang was simply the other, the second brain that struck our own and ignited the fire of our existence. The standard singularity model acted as a comfort because it suggested we were the only thing that mattered, a one-time act of creation. But the cosmic foam and brain collision angles strip away that safety. They suggest that our universe could be hit again at any moment, or that we are currently drifting toward another sheet of reality that will eventually overwrite everything we have ever known. The Big Bang was just the moment our bubble was struck, a flash of heat that signaled our arrival into a much larger, much more violent multiverse. As numerical relativity simulations attempt to model these mergers of space-time, we are finding that the homogeneity of our universe might not be a sign of a perfect beginning, but a sign of a well-mixed collision. Just as we use computers to track the ripples of black holes colliding, we are now trying to find the great ripples of the universe itself colliding with another. If we find them, it will prove that we are not the inhabitants of a new world, but the survivors of a higher dimensional wreck. We are living in the afterglow of a crash, and the something terrifying before the Big Bang was simply the other car in the collision, one that is still out there, drifting in the dark, waiting for the cycle to bring us back together. If we are to understand the something terrifying that existed before our world, we must look past the debris of higher dimensional collisions and into the engine of creation itself. We have arrived at the moment where physics stops being about objects and starts being about a shadow, the shadow of the inflaton. In the standard story of our universe, we are told that matter and light were the first things to appear, but mainstream cosmology now admits there was a ghost in the machine that predates every atom in your body. This was the inflaton field, a special type of energy that dictated whether the universe was on or off. It was the force that drove the accelerated expansion of the cosmos, doubling and redoubling the size of reality until the very concept of small was destroyed. To visualize this, physicists ask us to imagine a landscape that does not exist in our three-dimensional space. In this other space, the inflaton field has a value, a position on a hill. We are told that the Big Bang began because this field started at the top of that hill and, driven by a cosmic instability, began to roll down. As it descended, it pushed the boundaries of space-time outward at an exponential rate. Only when it reached the bottom, the minimum of its landscape, did the inflation stop. At that moment, the field decayed, dumping all of its incomprehensible energy into space, heating it up, and producing the particles of matter that would eventually become stars, planets, and people. This is the hot, dense phase we call the Big Bang. But this elegant explanation hides a disturbing omission. If the inflaton field rolled down a hill to start our universe, what was at the top? What force or what event placed the ball at the absolute peak of that potential landscape? This is the ancient field, the deeper, non-spatial substrate that predates space-time itself. Standard cosmology treats the top of the hill as a convenient starting point, a given of the equations. But if we follow the logic to its terrifying conclusion, the universe we inhabit is not the fundamental layer of reality. It is a byproduct, a secondary effect of an older, deeper, and potentially incomprehensible field that exists outside the dimensions we perceive. This ancient field represents a reality that is fundamentally abstract. While we live in a world of things, of matter and energy, the ancient field is a world of patterns and potential. It is a substrate that does not just exist in space, it is the parent of space. In this framework, the Big Bang was not an act of creation, but a phase transition, a moment where the ancient field reached a critical state and spilled over into the physical world. We are living in the smoke and ashes of a collapse that happened in a realm we cannot even map. The terror of the inflaton field lies in its efficiency. It was a cosmic delete key designed to smooth out the mess of whatever came before. If the universe before the Big Bang was chaotic, jagged, or filled with the structures of a previous existence, the rapid expansion of inflation took those features and stretched them so thinly that they vanished from our view. It rendered the before inaccessible, a forbidden zone of history mathematically hidden behind a wall of exponential growth. We look at our smooth, homogeneous sky and see a perfect beginning, but we are actually looking at a crime scene where the evidence has been meticulously scrubbed away. But the signal from before time suggests that the erasure was not absolute. The James Webb Space Telescope's discovery of impossible mature galaxies in the early universe hints that some structures were so resilient that even the inflaton's delete key couldn't overwrite them. These galaxies are glitches in a universe that was supposed to be a fresh start. They imply that the ancient field at the top of the hill wasn't empty. It was already programmed with information, with blueprints for a reality that refused to stay buried. This leads us to a psychological anchor we are rarely willing to drop. If the inflaton field is just a mechanism, then what is the field itself? In the simulation reset hypothesis, the inflaton is seen as an initialization protocol, a computational necessity to clear the cache of a previous unstable version of reality. If reality is fundamentally informational, then the Big Bang was the moment the reboot occurred. The something terrifying before the Big Bang was the previous version of the world, a version that was intentionally wiped to make room for us. We have been taught to visualize the Big Bang as a point of infinite density, a singularity where time began. But as we've seen, the singularity is just a mask for our ignorance, a place where our math breaks down. Inflation replaces the singularity with a field, a cold, empty, but hyperactive state of potential. This field didn't just create the universe, it inflated a tiny, interconnected patch of the ancient field into the vastness we see today. We are a single bubble in a cosmic foam of infinite other universes, each one born from its own inflaton roll. But if inflation is eternal, as some theories suggest, then the erasure never truly stops. Outside our local bubble, the inflaton field is still at the top of the hill, still doubling and redoubling space-time in a relentless storm of expansion. We are living in a tiny, temporary clearing within a perpetual blizzard of creation. Our beginning was merely a local pause in an infinite, terrifying process of erasure. The ancient field is the ghost that haunts modern physics. It is a substrate that doesn't understand our concepts of space or time because it is the very thing that generates them. When we ask what came before the Big Bang, we are asking a question that the ancient field has already answered. There is no before, because time is a secondary property, a ripple, on the surface of a much deeper, non-spatial ocean. We are the shrapnel of that ocean's waves. The inflaton field is the shadow that this ocean casts onto our reality. It tells us that our world was born from a state of nothingness that was actually an infinite something. The something terrifying before the Big Bang was the realization that we are not the first occupants of existence, nor are we the fundamental layer of it. We are a byproduct of a field that predates the stars, a field that is still out there, rolling down hills and other landscapes, creating and deleting entire realities while we stare at the impossible fossils it left behind in our own. The wall of inflation is showing its first cracks, and the ancient field is starting to bleed through. We are finally beginning to see that the delete key didn't work. Something survived, and it is waiting for us to remember what we used to be. To understand the something terrifying that preceded our birth, we must now move beyond the realm of physical collisions in ancient fields and consider a possibility that is gaining traction in the darkest corners of speculative physics, that our reality is not a natural occurrence, but a programmed one. This is the simulation reset, or the reboot hypothesis, and it suggests that the Big Bang was not the beginning of a universe, but the initialization of a system. If this is true, then the laws of physics we study with such reverence are not fundamental truths of the cosmos, they are lines of code. And the Big Bang was the precise moment the old world was deleted to make room for us. For nearly a century, we have looked at the Big Bang as a physical event, a hot, dense phase where matter and energy suddenly appeared. But this view has always been plagued by glitches we cannot explain. We see anomalies in our physics, such as the unexplained constants of nature, the strength of gravity, the speed of light, the masses of elementary particles that seem so perfectly balanced for life that it feels statistically impossible. We are told this is either a lucky coincidence or the result of a multiverse where every possibility exists. But the reboot hypothesis offers a more disturbing answer. These constants are the residual settings from a previous run of the simulation. They are the cache that wasn't fully cleared when the system reset occurred. In this framework, the inflaton field, that mysterious force that drove the exponential expansion of the early universe, was actually an initialization protocol. It was a computational necessity designed to clear the mess of a previous version of existence that had become unstable or terrifying in its complexity. Think of a computer that has become so bogged down by fragmented data and conflicting programs that it can no longer function. The only solution is a hard reset, a formatting of the drive. Inflation was the cosmic steamroller that wiped the hard drive, stretching the lumps and bumps of the old reality so thinly that they became virtually invisible to the new inhabitants. But no deletion is ever truly perfect. Information theory suggests that information cannot be destroyed, and in a simulated reality, this means that fragments of the old world must persist as computational artifacts. We see these artifacts in the form of glitches in our laws of physics. Take, for example, the strange phenomenon of quantum randomness. According to the uncertainty principle, we can never know both the position and the momentum of a particle with absolute precision. The universe seems to have a built-in layer of fuzziness. To a physicist, this is a fundamental law. But to a programmer, this looks like a computational limit, a way for the system to save processing power by not calculating the exact state of every particle unless it is being observed or measured. It is as if the universe only renders the details when the camera is pointed at them. The something terrifying before the Big Bang was the version 1.0 of our reality. We don't know what it looked like, but we can guess why it was deleted. Perhaps the previous simulation reached a state of informational entropy where the complexity became too high for the substrate to handle. Or perhaps it was a Type 3 civilization from a previous aeon that grew so powerful they began to hack the very laws of their reality, threatening the stability of the entire system. The Big Bang was the emergency shutdown, the moment the administrators decided that the old world was too dangerous to continue. This shifts the Big Bang from an act of creation into a system reset that occurred in a much larger, darker, and more ancient cosmic cycle. We look at the smooth, uniform sky and see a perfect beginning, but we are actually looking at a crime scene where the evidence of the previous world was meticulously scrubbed away. The signal from before time is the only thing that might have survived this process, leaking through in those impossible fossils, like the mature galaxies found by the James Webb telescope. These galaxies aren't just old, they are legacy data, remnants of the previous version of the simulation that the delete key of inflation failed to fully overwrite. We are finding that the nothingness before the Big Bang was actually a void with memory, a pre-physical state where information patterns existed before there was ever a single star. In this framework, the universe is less about things and more about patterns. We are like characters in a video game who have started to notice the invisible walls and the repeating textures of our world. We have been taught to see the singularity as a wall of time, but it was actually a mask for the transition between two versions of the code. The dread of the reboot hypothesis is the realization that if the system was reset once, it can be reset again. The dark energy that is currently causing our universe to accelerate its expansion could be the first sign of the next initialization phase, a gradual clearing of the current. Cache to make room for version 3.0. We are living in a temporary clearing, a safe bubble where the delete key has been momentarily paused. As we look closer at the zero-point energy of the vacuum, that faint hiss of energy that exists even in empty space, we realize we are listening to the background noise of a previous aeon. It is the cache that wasn't cleared, the residual settings of a world that was deemed too terrifying to exist. We are building our civilizations on the graveyard of a previous reality, unaware that our beginning was simply the moment the screen went black and then flickered back to life, with a new set of instructions. The something terrifying didn't go away, it was just uninstalled. But as the James Webb telescope peers through the cracks in the code, we are beginning to see the fragments of the world that came before, and we are forced to wonder what will happen when the system decides it's time to reboot again. The discoveries made by the James Webb Space Telescope were supposed to bring us clarity, a crystal clear image of our own humble beginnings. Instead, they have presented us with a paradox that threatens to dismantle our entire cosmic history. We were told that the early universe was a desolate place, a dark and formless soup of hydrogen where the first stars were only beginning to flicker into existence. We expected to see the smoke and ashes of a recent firework, primitive, clumpy, and unformed. But what the telescope found in the so-called Dark Ages were not nurseries, but fully realized, massive and structured galaxies that look as mature as our own Milky Way. They are universe breakers, cosmic anachronisms that have existed for billions of years longer than our current timeline allows. This mature galaxy paradox forces us to reconsider everything. If these galaxies were already developed mere hundreds of millions of years after the Big Bang, they didn't just form quickly. They didn't have enough time to mix the milk into the coffee. The terrifying implication is that they might not have formed in our universe at all. They are impossible fossils from an aeon that refused to be erased, remnants that survived a transition we once thought was an absolute beginning. We have been taught to view the Big Bang as a north pole of time, a point beyond which nothing can exist. But the presence of these mature structures suggests that the Big Bang was not a wall, but a veil, a mask thrown over a previous existence that left behind physical evidence of its presence. If the universe is cyclical, as Roger Penrose's conformal cyclic cosmology suggests, then we are merely one aeon in an infinite chain of universes. This means that the matter in your body, the gold in the earth, and the hydrogen in the stars are not new. They are recycled shrapnel from a previous world's end. But the cycle doesn't just recycle matter, it recycles patterns. Information theory tells us that information cannot be truly destroyed. If patterns of structure survived the system reset of the Big Bang, then the galaxies we see in the deep past are not just random clusters of gas, they are the inherited blueprints of a previous reality. Think about the sheer scale of what this implies. If structures as complex as spiral galaxies survived the transition, then what else was carried over? We are forced to look at the void with memory and realize that the vacuum energy of our space is already programmed with the laws of physics from the universe that came before. We aren't living in a brand new house. We are building our civilization on the graveyard of a previous occupant. And that occupant was likely far more advanced than we can comprehend. In the language of the Kardashev scale, a Type 3 civilization is one that has harnessed the energy of its entire galaxy. Such a civilization would have reshaped their reality, perhaps even hacking the very laws of physics to ensure their survival or to extend their computational reach. If our Big Bang was a simulation reset, or a system reset intended to clear an unstable or terrifyingly complex previous version of reality, then these mature galaxies are the legacy data that the administrators failed to fully overwrite. They are the glitches in the code, the physical evidence that a highly ordered, potentially sentient-driven structure existed before time began for us. We have been walking through a room we were told was freshly painted, only to find ancient weathered furniture sitting in the center. These universe breakers are that furniture. They suggest that the Dark Ages were not a time of primitive gas, but a time where the ghosts of a Type 3 civilization were still visible. We are living in the smoke and ashes of their end. The concentric circles in the cosmic microwave background, the scars of supermassive black hole collisions from the previous aeon, are the only tombstones they have left behind. This realization transforms our understanding of our place in the cosmos. We are not the pioneers of a new world. We are the second-hand occupants of a recycled one. Every time we point our telescopes deeper into the void, we are finding that the universe has a much longer memory than we were led to believe. The something terrifying before the Big Bang was not a void, but a crowded, structured, and potentially inhabited reality that had to be deleted to make room for our existence. But why was it deleted? Was it an emergency shutdown because the previous occupants had grown too powerful? Or was it a natural big bounce where the universe reached a maximum density and simply rebounded, carrying the most resilient structures with it? Regardless of the cause, the mature galaxy paradox reveals that the Big Bang was not a clean break. The singularity was a lie used to protect us from the existential dread of knowing we are living in a ruin. We look at the stars and see light, but we should be seeing the refracted echoes of a previous world's history. The ancient field that predates space-time was already programmed with the blueprints of these galaxies before our expansion ever began. We are building our cities on the scorched timber of a mansion that burned down an eternity ago. And as we peer through the cracks in our physical laws, the glitches like quantum randomness and unexplained constants, we are starting to see the outlines of the previous version of reality. The terror is not just that something existed before, but that it refused to stay dead. The signal from before time is still leaking through. These mature galaxies are a warning that information survives the fire of creation. If they could survive the transition from the last universe to ours, then what will survive of us when our own aeon comes to an end? We are the survivors of a cosmic reset that was never quite complete, living among the ghostly imprints of giants that died before we were even a thought in the code. The graveyard is full, and the ghosts are finally starting to speak through the lenses of our most advanced telescopes. To grasp the final and most disturbing truth about what existed before the Big Bang, we must discard our most basic intuition, the belief that time flows like a river. We feel the now as a fleeting moment, a razor-thin edge between a past that is gone forever and a future that hasn't happened yet. But Einstein showed us that this common-sense picture of time is fundamentally wrong. He realized that the distinction between past, present, and future is nothing more than a stubborn, persistent illusion. In the actual fabric of the cosmos, time does not pass. Instead, every event that has ever happened or will ever happen exists simultaneously in a massive, four-dimensional tapestry called space-time. Think about your own sense of now. You might imagine that everyone in the universe agrees on what is happening at this exact moment, as if there is a universal master clock ticking away for everyone. But there is no such clock. To understand this, picture the history of the universe not as a sequence of events, but as a giant loaf of bread, a block universe. Every moment is a slice of that loaf. Your now is just one particular slice. But Einstein discovered that the angle of your slice depends entirely on how you are moving through space. Imagine an entity in a galaxy 10 billion light-years from Earth. If that entity is sitting still, its now slice might align perfectly with yours. But if that entity simply stands up and starts walking away from Earth, its now slice tilts. Because of the vast distance, even a slow walking pace causes its present moment on Earth to skip back 1,000 years, intersecting with the time when Vikings were sailing the seas or the Great Pyramid was being built. If it turns around and walks toward Earth, it now leans into our future by thousands of years, potentially glimpsing a time when humanity has reached a Type 2 civilization or colonized other worlds. This isn't just a mathematical quirk, it is a physical reality of our universe. It means that the past hasn't disappeared and the future isn't missing. They are both simply located in different directions within the space-time block. And this is where the something terrifying before the Big Bang finally reveals its true face. For 10 chapters, we have spoken of the before as if it were a distant country we left behind 13.8 billion years ago. We treated the Big Bang as a wall or a reset. But if all of time exists simultaneously, then the Big Bang was not an origin point, it was merely a phase change in a much larger, infinite structure. This implies that the terrifying thing that existed before the Big Bang, the previous aeon, the graveyard of Type 3 civilizations, the ancient field, is still here. It hasn't been deleted, it is just hidden in the now slices of space-time that we cannot perceive from our current angle of motion. We are like characters in a book who believe the previous chapter has ceased to exist simply because we've turned the page. But the previous chapter is still there, printed on the same paper, bound in the same volume. Our universe's past, present, and future are all interlocked in a continuous, cyclic chain where the remote future of one aeon becomes the Big Bang of the next. If Penrose's conformal cyclic cosmology is correct, the incredibly diffuse end of the universe before ours was rescaled into our incredibly hot, dense beginning. But in a block universe, that previous universe didn't go away to make room for us. It occupies the same higher dimensional landscape. The ghostly imprints we see in the cosmic microwave background, the concentric circles left by colliding black holes from the previous aeon, are the places where our reality is, still touching the one that came before. The terror of the eternal now is the realization that we are living in a house that is perpetually on fire, perpetually being built, and perpetually a ruin, all at once. The system reset we call the Big Bang was just a transition in the code, a reboot that attempted to mask a previous version of reality that had become too dangerous or complex. But you cannot truly delete the previous version in a universe where information is indestructible. Fragments of that old world persist as glitches in our physical laws, as impossible fossils that shouldn't exist in our timeline. There is one entity in our universe that sees this truth clearly, the photon. Because photons travel at the speed of light, they travel along null geodesics, paths where they experience neither time nor space. For a photon, it now includes the past, the present, and the future simultaneously. A photon emitted at the moment of the Big Bang and a photon hitting your eye right now are experiencing the same event. They are the messengers of the eternal now, moving through both time and space in a way that they perfectly offset each other, remaining forever instantaneous. We find ourselves at the edge of the horizon, looking back at a beginning that was never a wall, but a bridge. We have been taught to fear the nothingness of the void, but the void is the most active substance in existence, a void with memory teeming with the restless energy of every universe that has ever been. The something terrifying before the Big Bang is not a ghost story from the past. It is a permanent resident of the present. It is hidden in the zero-point energy of the vacuum, whispering through the quantum fluctuations that seeded our galaxies. The Big Bang was a veil, a mask of ignorance we used to feel like the first inhabitants of reality. But as the James Webb Telescope lifts the edge of that curtain, we see that the graveyard is full and the ghosts are speaking. We are the survivors of a cosmic reset that was never quite complete, living in a tiny clearing within a perpetual blizzard of creation and erasure. The distinction between before and after is a lie told to us by our biology to keep us from losing our minds in the face of an infinite, recycled eternity. The terrifying thing is still here. It is in the now slices you aren't looking at. It is in the ancient field that predates your atoms. It is the background noise of your existence, a silent witness to the fact that there was never a start and there will never be an end. We are simply ripples in a field that has been vibrating for an eternity, caught in an eternal now where the birth and death of the universe are happening at the same time. Forever. We aren't just moving toward the future, we are drifting through the wreckage of a past that refuses to stay buried. And one day, the cycle will bring us back to the moment where the mask slips entirely, and we will remember what we were before the light ever began.